What if we took a tour of the world through Donald Trump's eyes? Well, in a wide-ranging interview, he did just that, laying out his foreign policy for some of the planet's biggest hotspots. We're going to break down his exact words, region by region, to really understand the strategy. And we're starting with a claim that honestly sets the tone for everything else. Right out of the gate, you get this stunning statement about Venezuela. We have taken over a whole country. Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't just talk. It's a claim of direct intervention, of massive-scale nation-building. It is the perfect entry point for understanding the worldview we're about to unpack. So, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with that really bold claim in Venezuela. Then, we'll see how a similar logic gets applied to the Middle East, especially when it comes to Iran. After that, we'll shift gears to Europe and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And finally, we'll pull it all together to see the big picture, the foreign policy vision that ties all these pieces together.
Okay, first stop, Latin America. Now, the plan for Venezuela is incredibly ambitious, but what's just as fascinating is how Trump believes this one move will set off a domino effect, ultimately leading to the collapse of its closest ally, Cuba.
So, how do you even begin to justify an intervention on that scale? Well, you start by defining the problem. And Trump's diagnosis is that Venezuela is so fundamentally broken, it literally can't even manage to hold an election. This assessment isn't just an observation. It's the entire foundation for the very hands-on plan he's about to lay out. So what is the plan? It all unfolds in 4 clear steps. First, rebuild the oil infrastructure. But step 2, that's the bombshell. The U.S. will be in charge of it. Step 3 is the payoff. He claims this will be super profitable for everybody. And then notice what comes dead last. Only after the U.S. has established control, elections. And to really drive home the need for this kind of intervention, he puts a massive number on the table, $4 billion. That's how much oil revenue he claims was lost in a single day. The implication is crystal clear. This isn't just about politics, it's about securing a colossal economic asset that he believes is just being wasted. And here's where the dominoes start to fall. The logic is pretty straightforward. Cuba depends on Venezuelan oil to survive. So if the U.S. takes control of Venezuela's oil, it effectively cuts Cuba's lifeline. In this view, the fall of the Cuban government isn't just a possibility. It's pretty much a done deal. Right. Let's hop over to the Middle East now, because we see a very similar pattern play out. You identify one single adversary as the root of every problem. And in this case, that adversary is Iran. The claim here is that by taking on Iran, he actually brought peace to the entire region. Now, this is a monumental claim, right? Achieving peace in a region that's been defined by conflict for generations. And the key, according to him, wasn't about negotiating directly with enemies. Instead, it was about building a powerful coalition with key Arab states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE to completely isolate their common rival. And this slide really gets to the core of his Iran strategy. He frames it as a total 180 from the previous administration. He paints this vivid picture of his predecessor sending Iran cargo planes of cash, while his approach was the total opposite, squeezing them with maximum economic pressure. It's a stark contrast between engagement and containment. And here's the reason for that incredibly hardline stance: a ticking clock. He claims Iran was just 2 months away from having a nuclear weapon. From his perspective, there was zero chance for stability until that one single threat was taken off the table. That, in his words, is why he had to go in. So this intense focus on the Iranian regime leads us directly to our next topic. And this is where the stakes get even higher. It's his direct message to the protesters who are trying to overthrow that very regime from the inside. He paints this picture of a nation that's right at a tipping point. We're not just talking about protests, but a full-blown popular uprising, fueled by what he calls an incredible enthusiasm for change. This isn't just some political problem for the regime, it's an existential threat. So you have this incredibly explosive situation on the ground, which sets up a critical question that the interview addresses head-on. What exactly is his warning to the Iranian government as it faces this rebellion? And here it is, the core of his message. It's a direct threat. He says he's put the regime on notice. If they harm the protesters, the U.S. will hit them very hard. This goes way beyond just moral support. It's a pledge of military intervention on behalf of the Iranian people. All right, for our final stop on this tour, returning to Europe and the war in Ukraine. Here, the focus shifts a bit away from direct intervention and more towards the tools of economic warfare and a really strong assertion of presidential power. When he talks about Russia, his starting point is that the current sanctions are already doing their job. He describes Russia's economy as very bad. Now, that's a crucial baseline because it shapes his whole view on whether new, tougher measures are even needed.
And this is a really fascinating moment because it's all about the separation of powers. When he's asked about Congress passing new sanctions, his response is completely unambiguous. Any new measures are subject to me. It's a crystal clear assertion that when it comes to foreign policy, the president gets the final word.
Okay, so we've toured the globe, right? From Latin America to the Middle East, all the way to Europe. What's the common thread here? Let's step back for a second and connect the dots to see the bigger foreign policy vision that starts to take shape from all these statements. You know, when you look at the whole picture, a pretty clear philosophy emerges. It's built on a few core ideas, using American power to directly control key economic assets, like with Venezuelan oil. It's a deep belief that maximum economic pressure, not diplomacy, is what brings adversaries to the table. It's about openly supporting regime change from within and then backing that up with military threats. And holding it all together is this powerful assertion of unilateral presidential authority to make it all happen. So, we've laid out the vision, and that leaves us with one final big question to think about. If this approach were fully put into practice, how would it actually reshape our world? What would happen to our existing alliances, to ongoing conflicts, and to the global balance of power? That's the big question to ponder.